Part of that will be, I'm sure, some additional fencing or barriers on the southern border. But my view of it, and I'll be honest, I take a lot of my cue from Republican Congressman Will Hurd. Will has 800 miles of the southern border in his congressional district. It is the most amount of miles that any member of Congress has. And his view of it is exactly as mine. There are places where local communities would like more barriers or fencing or wall, whatever you want to call it. But there are other places in his district where it makes more sense to have, drones or sonar or technology as part of the solution. Two things. We have currently one of the largest number of openings ever in customs border agents. And so we need to make sure that we're doing that hiring as well so that we can protect, again, our ports of entry, because that's where a lot of the challenges from drugs are coming into this country. You mentioned also those seeking asylum. Asylum is a legal way to come through a port of entry and enter this country. The challenge we have today, though, is as long as our immigration system is broken, people are going to try to go around that system. And right now, with a multi-year long process of wait to get in the country legally, that's a challenge. So I also think we need to hire more immigration judges so that we can adjudicate these claims and, again, allow legal entry or get them out. So it's a challenging, I know it's a politically polarizing topic for a lot of us. The truth is, I think there are places where we may need additional border security in this country, and I've been very open with that. And there are places we need more technology, we need more personnel. And I think we just have to listen to the experts here and be willing to fund those things that will protect and secure our borders. But immigration, if we think about it, is also an economic issue. We know that we need legal immigration to this country. In my farm listening session yesterday, one of the biggest concerns my farmers have is the H-2A program for temporary ag workers in this country. They literally have, apples still sitting in orchards because it's been very, very difficult to get those 2A workers here to do those works that we can't find Americans who want to do. So it's a challenging topic. There will be a bill coming forward. It is coming forward. It will tackle the issue of the Dreamers. There is a bill, I think it's H.R. 6, and that is coming forward soon. It will also deal with deferred action and also TPS. So you're going to see that coming. It may be an opportunity to add some 2A things into it. It's not currently in it for our agriculture economy. But we need to have an honest discussion about immigration and what is the right way to go. And where's my timer? Because I know I went over 2 minutes. Who's my timer? Christina? Okay, all right, good. And if I do that again, I want you to jump up and start doing jumping jacks or something.
That was probably my fault. She was so subtle there, I didn't notice.
Yeah, I didn't. Well, and your shirt matches that card, so you're blending in. So anyway, I definitely stop me next time.
All right, let's go to the other side over here.
Hi, my name is Kate Zenker, and I'm getting my doctorate in physical therapy right now. So healthcare is obviously something that I care a lot about, and I know that healthcare access has been on your mind as well. In what I've seen on my clinicals so far, physical therapy, definitely we need more access. I think health insurance is part of that. And I think that overall there needs to be more changes for our patients and for your constituents. So what are some of the things that are happening right now with healthcare access in addition to the bill that you introduced, and how can we support you in that?
Thank you so much, and thank you for what you do. So there are a number of things happening in the U.S. Congress right now. One of them is my reduction of premium in the individual marketplace bill, but we are going to hold hearings on a number of different ideas. Everything from Medicare for All to buying into Medicare to also buying into Medicaid. We have a number of different initiatives. But the truth is, we've only had a conversation about health insurance and the cost of health insurance over the last decade in this country. And we're going to have a conversation about how do we start to control cost. Part of that is how do we start to control the cost of prescription drugs in this country. And I have joined the Diabetes Caucus. I've been working with a number of other members around how can we stop this idea of pay for delay, where brand name drug companies pay generic providers to stay out of the marketplace. And this is a really, really personal issue to me. Many of you know that I grew up in my own family without access to health insurance. Not because health insurance wasn't there, we couldn't afford it. And so if people can't afford their health insurance, that is a challenge and a problem. And if we allow more generic providers, we would allow more competition. If we allow buy to Medicare, that will allow for more competition. So I think we have to be willing to take on some of the special interests in this country. And I can tell you, there's about 6 pharmaceutical lobbyists to every member of Congress. I'm not kidding. It's just unbelievable. In fact, they managed to infect NAFTA 2.0, USMCA, which we're going to start debating here currently, in that there is, even though NAFTA had no provision on pharmaceutical in it, they have managed to work into USMCA. I'll tell you about it later. I just got stopped. Oh, this is going to be fun.
Back over here.
Hi there, Ms. Craig. My name is Catherine McComas-Bussey. I am a student at Shakopee High School. I was volunteering your campaign all summer. And I'm also the chair of the Minnesota Youth Council. So we're the legislatively mandated voice of the youth of Minnesota. So we work really closely with our local legislators and Department of Education to make sure that no decision is made about youth without youth on the legislative level. So we draft policy and we we have Senate hearings, we summon senators and representatives, and we do a lot of things locally, but I'm wondering what you are doing currently and what you can do in the future to incorporate more thoroughly youth voice into your decision-making process.
Wow, that's a great question. And thank you so much for being here today and for your advocacy for the things that you care about. I hope that it is evident that I am trying to incorporate youth in our community into not only my considerations, but also into the listening that I'm doing. Before I come out and meet with you, I talk to the youth who come out on the stage with me about what they care about and what they're thinking about. And having had 4 sons of my own, I know it's tough to get them sometimes to get engaged, but that's what we want, right? We want young people to get more engaged in our communities, in our society. And so one of the things that I supported as part of HR 1 and that was incorporated into an amendment is basically allowing, before kids turn 18, these young people to register to vote, but not to vote until they're 18. We want to get them engaged as possible early in their world, in their communities. And as you all well know, my door, my district staff is always open. So I will continue to engage. And I have to tell you, it's, I feel pretty good about the future of the world with the current crop of young people who are coming up, and the advocacy and the engagement that I am seeing from your communities. And it's just extraordinary, and just keep showing up, keep pushing for what you believe in. And I feel pretty good about the future of this country with the advocacy level I'm seeing right now. Thank you.
Back over here.
Good morning. I'm Paul Christensen from Shakopee. And the federal budget deficit is soaring and pretty much out of control. I'm just curious, what are you doing to address this issue?
Well, it's a great question. And, all of you know, I've said many, many times, if I support a proposal, I want to know what's it going to cost the country. We're at $22 trillion. We're at a $22 trillion deficit. And I happen to be one of those politicians who believes that's a bad thing. That ultimately, the fact that we're paying so much interest on our debt, investing more in interest costs than we are in many of the other values-based important things to me. So What I can commit to you, because I'm one of 535, is that any piece of legislation that I support, I'm always going to ask, what does it cost and how are we going to pay for it? A good example of that, many of you know that I support aggressively addressing climate change in this country, but there is a proposal, it's a bipartisan proposal called carbon fee and dividend that is my preferred choice. That is because it is budget neutral to the United States and would still help us address one of the most urgent needs of this country. So what I can commit to you is being one of the members of Congress who will continue to look at that. And frankly, I will continue to call it out when I see things not going the right way. Many of you know that I opposed the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act because my fear was if you give corporations a rather large tax break, it would not result in the economic growth that we wanted in this country. And that is why we are seeing our deficits start to go up at the rate they are. The revenues just aren't coming in because corporations, large corporations, are not paying the taxes they once were, and our deficits are starting to grow. Thank you so much for your question.
My name is John Helmke, and I'm dissatisfied with the two choices America's political system gives us, the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. I'm more on the left, so I'm concerned about the Democratic Party. I think Lyndon Johnson was wrong in Vietnam War, but he set a high bar domestically with the Great Society programs, and I don't think the Democratic Party has lived up to that since. And I would like to be able to choose more parties on my ballot. I would like to see European-style party list proportional representation, what they have in the Netherlands, where if you're dissatisfied with a political party, you have a choice to vote for a different political party. Instead of candidate, be able to vote for a political party and it gets a certain number of seats in the legislature and matches the percentage of votes it gets. And that way you can switch parties if you don't feel that one or the other party is answering issues of concern to you, such as poverty. You can start a new party and get more done.
Please ask your question.
Yes. My question is will you study different political systems that use democracy, especially in Europe?
Thank you so much for your question, and I'm glad he had to call you out because now I feel better about being called out, so thank you for doing that for me. The answer is I think we should always be studying our political system. You know, ranked choice voting is something that we've seen as sort of a reform to give in certain cities. Obviously, there are many political systems around the world, and you know, the truth is, you know, if you look at the party that you know I'm currently representing, you know, it's a pretty damn big tent. I mean, you think about some of the range of ideological views in my own party, there is a fairly large range. And so one of my challenges, to be honest, with representing you is that you often get fully branded whichever party, obviously, you're running within. And that's why it's so important for me to communicate with all of you where I am on the issues, because the truth is, if I could run nonpartisan, you know, just against my opponent for Congress, I'd love to do that. I'd love to be able to do that because I would love to be able to present our views and have you judge, who do you want to represent? Here are my values, here are my views, here are the things I consider to be important. But the political system in the United States is what it is today, and so therefore I continue to try to communicate to you where I am on these issues so you can make an informed choice. But thank you for your feedback.
Hi, I'm Heidi Evanson from Egan, and I wanted to ask you about the status of the Violence Against Women Act, that it expired with the government shutdown and wasn't included in the February funding bill. I received services almost exactly 10 years ago in Olmsted County and through Rochester Family Services, and I have seen firsthand the importance of those programs. It's also a public safety issue. Police officer Duluth was shot earlier this week, and the police dog that was with him was killed. So just wanted to check in with you what the plans are for reauthorizing that.
Thank you so much for the question, and as we all know, it's a very, very important question, and unfortunately that did get left out. We are looking for a place to expeditiously reauthorize the Violence Against Women's Act. And I just want to say how important it is for you to advocate, and thank you for sharing your own personal story here today and experiences so that we can make sure that we understand how important this issue is. I am committed to supporting that reauthorization. I think, again, we're looking for the best place to do it in the most expeditious manner. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Andrew, and I'm really here on behalf of my friend Javier, who is a student, engineering student at Mankato State University, and he happens to be a citizen of Venezuela. Venezuela right now is undergoing a tremendous crisis. The average person has lost 25 pounds due to food shortages. 90% of the people live in poverty. The infant mortality rate there right now is higher than Syria. We have had 3.4 million refugees coming out of Venezuela. Brookings Institution says it will probably rise to about 8 million, which is about a quarter of the country's population. And there's also tremendous political oppression in Venezuela. Opposition parties have been banned, their leaders have been jailed. Elections have been held that have widely been discredited as fraudulent, with millions of votes being stolen. And yet, despite all this, Venezuelans currently do not have temporary protected status. That has not been extended to them. Senators Klobuchar and Smith were recently among 24 senators who signed a letter asking the president to extend temporary protected status. We have a bipartisan bill in the House, 549, H.R. 549, that would extend temporary protected status to Venezuelans. So I guess my question is, will you sign on as a co-sponsor of that legislation? And how do you feel about this crisis? And would you be interested in meeting with Venezuelans like Javier to see how the United States can help have a transition back to respect for human rights and democracy in Venezuela?
Thank you so much for your question. We all know this is a very serious humanitarian issue in Venezuela right now. And the short answer to it is, and I always say this because whenever you go down to the House floor to vote, your colleagues are a little bit like vultures coming at you and asking you to sign on to every single one of their bills. And I learned very, very quickly that your response, the appropriate response is always, that sounds like something I would want to support, and let me take that back to my legislative team and we'll take a look at that particular piece of legislation. I think at last count, maybe a week ago, 3,147 pieces of legislation had been introduced in the U.S. House in the 116th Congress. But I will tell you that I have been working with Congressman Dean Phillips and others on extending the temporary protection status for the Liberian community here in Minnesota. And that I will continue to encourage the administration to look at these asylum cases and just the horror that folks are enduring in other parts of the world and live up to the country that I know we are. Thank you.
My name is Frank. First of all, my name is Mary. I wanted to say thank you for doing this. I'm not a member of your party, but I do appreciate you willing to listen to all of your constituents. Okay. First question, I have many questions, but one of the questions I would like to ask you, name me one thing that federal government does well except spending our money and that they're to say frivolously. Another thing is, I would like to know, how did you vote on Ilhan Omar, the last bill that was passed? And another question we have is, all these bills, and especially of healthcare, they're passed. Is there any particular reason that members of Congress are not following the same, they have same healthcare bills as the rest of the people? Because it seems like there's a ruling class, and I know you just got elected, I get it, but it seems like there's a ruling class and then there's us. What was the reasoning for you? And when I say you, I don't mean, like I said, I know you just got elected. You versus us.
Can I start answering your questions because I'm going to forget them all?
Come on.
Yeah, good. Thank you. So first of all, every member of Congress, new member, I don't know where the cutoff is, but if we want health insurance in this country, we go to the individual marketplace. That was a change when the ACA was passed. New members of Congress, I buy my health insurance in the individual marketplace just like all of you. Now let me be clear, I declined my health insurance from the United States. I declined that benefit from the US. So I am not receiving that benefit at all, no subsidy, none of that. Let me go to your first comment about what good does the US government do. Before we passed Medicare and Social Security in this country, there were over 40% of America's seniors living in poverty, just living in poverty. I don't believe, as a society, that that is what we want to represent, that we allow our neighbors to live in poverty. What I believe is that we should strengthen Social Security and Medicare. Strengthening Social Security, I'm a co-sponsor on a bill by John Larson that would strengthen it to the year 2100 by allowing people who are making millions of dollars to pick back up and contribute into the Social Security Trust Fund. That would extend it to 2100, the year 2100. I believe Medicare is a good program, that we should also strengthen. And the first step is for the United States Congress to stop preventing the government from negotiating drug pricing in Medicare. Those are two very, very easy things that we should be doing as Americans. So I worked in regulated industries for over 20 years. There are certain things that the U.S. government does, and as I'm there now, I see the bureaucracy that it can be. I do. I'm going to acknowledge that every single town hall from now until the end of time. But there are some very important things. There's a balance of regulation. There is a balance of...
wrap up this section.
Thank you. She gets 6 minutes and she gets asked 3 questions.
You probably should only ask one question at a time.
All right. So, but at the end of the day, the budget in America is about what kind of country we want to be, and I just don't believe we as Americans should allow our seniors to live in poverty, and therefore I support some of those government programs. But thank you for being here. Thank you.
Just to be fair to others, yeah, we need to move on. Try and keep to one question. Thank you.
I basically have 2 simple questions, so we'll take one.
Well, you got to know the rules if you're going to break them. Yeah, I agree with you.
First of all, thank you for serving, and thank you to adding my seat now. I'm a classmate to your staff. It's very appreciated. My questions here are, what are some of the things you're working on to help represent people with disabilities? I am an advocate for people with disabilities and have them myself. What are you doing to help keep health care and help apartment housing into this community that's way needed, and that are limited on income, that want to still need independency, that need subsidized housing, and those are for need. And then my second quick question is on the side of this, the gal that you mentioned the gun control, my 2 cousins were the ones that were shot. Talk a little bit about that too. I'd appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So, very shortly, I agree that the United States Congress has a responsibility to continue to stand up for the disability community. And again, don't look at what I say, look at what I do. And one of the things that I will always do is make sure that I'm continuing to support Medicaid funding in this country. Again, we already talked about Medicare. Making sure that the appropriate accommodations are made. Because I think we have to be thoughtful about all of these things. And I want to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to reach their full potential. That's the whole promise of America. Not that we're going to just hand you everything, but that you have the opportunity to live a good life, and by the way, where you want to live. That's why rural broadband, that's why high-speed internet is so important. So that people can live and work and have that opportunity for a good life where they live. And then I think your last question was on gun safety reforms. Many of you know that I'm a supporter of the Second Amendment, but I don't believe that prohibits me from also being an advocate for gun safety reform. Universal background checks, H.R. 8, is a bill that passed the House, I think, since my last town hall. And I've also co-sponsored a bill that would allow the CDC to research gun violence in this country. I just believe we can't put our heads in the sand. If we believe that these things, and we see by the evidence in states that have implemented universal background checks, it has made a difference. 53% reduction in mass shooting, 48% reduction in police-involved shootings, 48% reduction in death by suicide. We have to look at the data, and we have to be willing to say, I can still trap shoot, and my sons can still duck hunt, and at the same time, we can make an effort to improve these things. So thank you for being here.
Representative Harvey Carl from Mendota Heights, it's always good to see you. Thank you for making yourself so accessible to your constituents. We appreciate that. And I will say that since you won, we're sleeping much better at night than we do with your predecessor.
Harvey, I appreciate it. I can promise you not everybody in here agrees. That's okay. I'm trying to find some common ground.
Okay. What's keeping us up at night, however, is bouncing off the question that was just previously asked, because of the tragedies of New Zealand this week, yet another example. We're afraid to go to crowds. I mean, quite frankly, being here today is troublesome to my household because that's where events are happening. Do you think possibly that if New Zealand, if their leader is able to make changes in laws as was stated this week, that might be an inspiration to more active change, more willingness to improve? We're never going to make it perfect, but do you think it'll give us the inspiration to improve what we have now?
Harvey, I'd love to say yes to you, but I'm not unrealistic.
Examples where we've been
right? I mean, if you look at what happened at the Tree of Life Synagogue in the United States, if you look at what happened in Charleston, if you look at all of these incidents, and my heart goes out to the people of New Zealand and Christchurch, right? But there are two issues that we're dealing with here. One is the rise of hate in this country. Yeah. Because whether it be our Jewish neighbors, or our Muslim neighbors, or our Christian neighbors, all three were having the same conversation. And I've already talked about gun safety a little bit, the things that I believe are integral to help reduce the incidents. There is nothing that will be an end-all to stop gun violence, but if you can save one person, if you can save one mother from mourning their child, just one, then it's worth studying, it's worth looking at, it's worth implementing. And so I know a lot of really good gun safety advocates around the country and gun owners who agree with me that things like universal background checks are just long overdue. And so I hope we have a conversation, continue it about gun safety, but I hope we also have a conversation about the need for more civility in public life, and especially from our community leaders, members of Congress, and others, elected officials. We cannot fan the flames of hate in this country for any. This country was founded on freedom of religion. We have to live up for our ideals, for liberty and justice, and don't forget the last two words, for all. Thank you.
You're absolutely right. Universal background checks, absolutely. If we could get rid of AR-15s, if we could get rid of those mass types of guns,